Welcome, comrades. You're listening to The Party Line, a podcast from The Ditch. News and opinion from Ireland on theditch.com. I'm Harry Browne.
I'm Niamh Bhriain, and you can follow The Party Line wherever you get your podcasts, or follow The Ditch on YouTube, on X.
Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, Upscrolled, WhatsApp, Blue Sky even. And we're podcasting from the Rosa Luxemburg studio in the depths of the Whistleblower building in Dublin city centre.
Yeah, we've got the whole Ditch staff here today, a full forward line of senior hurlers. So we have Eoghan McNeill, Paulie Doyle and Roman Shortall. And because we're all here and it's our first one, we're not really sure who the guests are and who the hosts are. But it's very egalitarian.
Everyone has questions, that's for sure. Episode 1, and hopefully everyone has answers. Not everyone has a microphone, I see, but we'll manage if you pass the mics between you very, very quietly. Today's main topic, because we're coming into St. Patrick's weekend, we're going to look at Ireland in a world of snakes with a focus on neutrality and defence, which is to say war and more war. That'll be you, Niamh, right?
Yep. But first, we're going to find out what's been going on at the Ditch. And since we've got the three of ye, and this is the first episode, we'll see if maybe you can bring everyone up to speed on what the Ditch is, what it's all about. Because, maybe it's possible that some of the listeners or the viewers are not so familiar with the Ditch. So just, again, the website is on theditch.com. Maybe Eoghan, I think you're going to tell us first a little bit about the Ditch.
I think we're coming up on our 5th birthday, or maybe we've celebrated it already and didn't realise, but 5 years of the Ditch. I had come back. I had worked for state media in China.
Oh no!
And the big bad state media. I was friends with Xi Jinping. And
Party line indeed.
And I came back from China and worked on a few media projects over the course of that year, which kind of culminated in working on that story about Leo Varadkar leaking that document to Matthew O'Toole. Out of that, ended up having a few conversations with Roman, and it was an interesting time. It was a funny time, it was during COVID, and we'd worked on what we thought could be the Ditch, and Roman had come up with we thought was a nice opening story for us about Micheál Martin attending a prohibited event, is what we call it, during COVID, honouring his Isle fella. And from that, we just kind of kept publishing, and it's been 5 years. It's been great. We like to think of ourselves, I suppose, as we're a left publication. I think we all have our own personal politics, but I think the site itself is probably left Republican or left populist. And we like to do a little bit of everything. Well,
you got Leo first, and then you got Micheál, right? So, but you might say the stories have kind of moved international a little bit in more recent years, haven't they?
Yeah.
You look at what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah. I mean, you go back 2 years, and this is not to say that this all started 2 years ago, but it certainly become starker, I think, over the last 2 years. And you come from the political tradition that the three of us come from. Look at that. It's a defining issue of our time, not just for Palestine, but for humanity. And as a result of that, started off, a large part of our focus became the Irish state's complicity in genocide and the use of Irish territory, primarily Irish airspace, to transport weaponry to Israel over the course of this genocide. And from that, and from working with international partners, we love the guys at Dropsite, the guys at Declassified, we have gone that little bit more international, and we have looked at weapons supply chains to Israel over the course of this genocide that have touched on European countries. Also, there's an obvious US angle to it. So a lot of our coverage has been about that. We also, it's funny how these things go. A month or so ago, it depends on how you chalk these things up, but certainly one way of looking at the story we did about Epstein's FedEx account was the biggest story that we've ever done in some regards. And, it was funny, I was out for dinner that week with a few of the boys, and, one of them was saying to me, Jesus, a lot of my friends who are in the Rogan sphere have been sending me that story. So we kind of cracked in a little bit to that with, with some of that Epstein stuff.
Yeah, there you go. So there have been some changes, and there's more changes coming in terms of like the legal status of the ditch, Roman, is that right?
Yeah, so it looks like there's going to be some big changes with how the ditch operates. We, for the past couple of years, since we started, we've operated through a limited company. But I think we're looking now at a CLG model, which is a company limited by guarantee, or also known as a non-profit. And I think that's something we've kind of naturally been moving towards over the past couple of years, just kind of based on a lot of the things that we've done. We've taken judicial review proceedings against the state, against local authorities, against SIPO, which were all successful and all involved, matters of public interest that would be relevant to not only the public, but journalists trying to access records and things like that. And I think just, because of the type of journalism that the ditch does, it's very much public interest journalism. I would say not all journalism is public interest journalism. A lot of it, particularly in Ireland, is PR, glossed up or dressed up as journalism. But, we at the ditch, I think we like to focus as much as possible on matters that are very much in the public interest. And for that reason, I think the kind of best model for us to operate going forward is as a non-profit.
So kind of a transparency initiative, working on a non-profit basis, as well as a journalism website.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's not a particularly popular model. There would be a couple of outlets in the UK. I think Dropsite News in the States is a non-profit. And, not that the ditch was making any great profits,
right.
But, I think it kind of takes that, maybe suspicion element out of it when there's no profit motive. We've seen how, big media moguls have kind of, I guess, some would say maybe destroyed journalism in pursuit of profit.
It's worth saying that the Future of Media Commission here in Ireland reported a couple of years ago, and one of the recommendations that was pretty much ignored was that there'd be an organized transition of major journalism institutions to nonprofit status. And that basically has disappeared, and most of the companies here continue to operate as normal companies, as it were. But certainly it's been the talk of how we make a new world for journalism, this kind of nonprofit move. So it's great to see the ditch kind of leading the way here in Ireland in that. Can I just ask then about money, since you mentioned that? I mean, how is the ditch surviving? I know there's only 3 of you, but you look very well. So as somebody's feeding you.
Haircuts as well.
Yeah, the haircuts.
Our readers are keeping us in haircut. Look, we're funded by our readers, and it's funny enough, we were, just before we started there, every now and again, we're asked to take part in university students, their theses, and somebody sent us questions along these kind of lines, and some of the questions were about fund media, the future of media, all that kind of thing, and talking about how, we're funded by our readers, and as I said in the written answers, I stand back. It's hard work. It's also imperfect. I'm not in journalism that long. It's about just over 10 years since, and I've been in and out of it a little bit. But as long as I've been in it, there was the pivot to video that was going to save the industry. That was in and around 10 years or so ago. Then there was, advertorial and sponsored content, and all these mainstream outlets had these content studios that blur the lines between journalism and advertisement. That supposedly was going to save journalism. Now everyone's very happy, or everyone's all behind paywalls, or like what we do at the ditch, voluntary subscriptions. I think it's good for now. I think it works. I don't think it's a panacea, and I don't necessarily think that in 5 years, 10 years time, we're going to be here talking about, aren't paywalls and aren't voluntary subscriptions great? It works for us at the moment.
You've got one really happy subscriber in particular, don't you?
Yeah, well, early doors, yeah, we had, and it was very grateful for when we set up. We were supported by Web Summit, and it was a huge help in getting the ditch started. Because there is that thing of on paper or in theory, I suppose, anyone can start something up and start publishing, but we live in a capitalist society. There are costs associated with that. So yeah, certainly when we started off, we were supported by Web Summit, and it was a huge help in getting the ditch going and transitioning to that reader funded model.
We're here in the Whistleblower building, which of course Paddy Cosgrave is launching onto the world here in Dublin and keeping the centrist dads on their toes. And the launch of the podcast itself, I guess, is something of a kind of a new break for the ditch as well. I should note that the podcast feed already includes a number of real nice episodes from 2024 when you were working with Red Wolf Media. So we're aspiring to meet the technical standard that Sean Murray brought you that time. And I should also say that Niamh and I, who'll be presenting the podcast, we're not actually employed by the ditch. We are, if you like, doing this on a voluntary basis at the moment, because we do think that, we really admire what the ditch does, and we are hopeful that the kind of ideas that you are bringing to the public are ones that we can help to share. The name, the party line, is I guess a kind of, I mentioned it earlier, a reference to what people might expect of ideological conformity on the left. But I think we're not the ideological conformists in Irish media. And partly what we're going to be doing here is looking at the kind of conformity that exists in other parts of the media. And I also must say that the name, the party line, refers to the possibility that the ditch might have a separate future series of podcasts in which we actually talk to people that we disagree with. Right? I think that was
debate me, bro.
one of Owen's first ideas, but for now it's no platform for liberals on the party line. So tell us what's in the ditch right now.
Oh, we had a few interesting stories this week. One of which was to do with the Irish Daily Mail, its social media channels. One of which, interestingly enough, is run from Israel. Three people or three ministers are listed on one of its on its Facebook page as being located in Israel. So we called up the editor, the executive editor of the Irish Daily Mail, and he didn't have anything to say about it. He usually has so much to say about Israel and what's happening there and our relationship to it. So it was curious that he
had a lot to say about Catherine Connolly not answering questions on the campaign trail. There were all these breathless condemnations and fears about. I remember there was one where he said, "This is how it starts." Catherine Connolly wouldn't answer. Which, that whole thing of, we've spoken about this, how, you work in the media and it's hard not to succumb to a little bit of lib brain sometimes, and to believe some of that stuff about how politicians should be engaging with media. At the same time, you kind of go, why would Catherine Connolly answer a question from the Irish Daily Mail? Why would she consider the Irish Daily Mail to be acting in good faith? Paulie called up John Lee.
Yeah.
And, when this is a guy who is, fine, John Lee.
Be nice now. Be nice on.
He's got a reasonable platform and a reasonable part to play in Irish media. And a large part of his brand is about, asking tough questions, holding people to account. Typically, people like Catherine Connolly, Jerry Adams, and being quite shocked when these people won't engage with him. Paulie tried to engage with him about where his site's social media pages are being run from.
He didn't have anything to say about it. I'll say that the article that he published the other day about Catherine Connolly and the absolutely ludicrous extremist remarks she made about how war crimes shouldn't happen and are illegal. He did this thing that journalists sometimes do, which is basically give ministers cover to attack somebody. So he cited a number of anonymous people who were in cabinet saying, "Oh, what she said is outrageous, and it's going to potentially imperil Micheál Martin's trip to Washington and his ability to kiss Donald Trump's hole," which is like the most important thing, obviously.
Let's talk about the other story, because it's not unrelated. It's not unrelated, which is the story about military mobility in Ireland. Apparently, the Europeans are talking about Ireland as a place where military action should be possible.
Well, we reported on a presentation that was given in January, which is kind of sometimes the commission comes in and will tell people who are negotiating on behalf of the various parties what's happening with something. This is to do with the military mobility package. And what the European Union is trying to do is basically kind of deregulate, lax the rules around the transportation of soldiers and the transportation of equipment throughout the European Union because, well, one, they say, and this isn't me exaggerating, they want to create a military Schengen, right? And two, because they anticipate that this is going to be something that they have to do.
For our American readers and listeners, perhaps Schengen is the common travel area that is in most of the EU, but doesn't actually include Ireland. But they want a common military movement area across the Union.
Yeah, and it's about, I suppose why it should concern us, and this is something we'll probably talk about in a bit, is that, it's part of, the European Union is steadily moving towards being basically a defensive alliance, and this is yet another example of a framework that's being created, which would embed us in these defense structures.
I think that's a good cue to maybe move on to talking about the first of our regular engagements with the non-ditch media. We've already been talking a little bit about the Daily Mail here today, but every week we're going to try to chat about some piece from the NDM, the non-ditch media that either amused, bemused, enraged, provoked, or otherwise caught our eye.
So the piece that we have chosen for this first podcast of non-ditch media is from Conor Gallagher from the Irish Times, and it appeared a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, I think, the end of February, and it's about Ireland and an arms deal with France. So I think
and who fears to speak 98? Not the Irish Times, because the headline on this piece was Year of the French, Part 2, which for those of you who didn't read the Leon Uris novel back in the late 20th century, that means that he's framing this arms purchase as the equivalent of Republican France support for the United Irishmen in the 1798 Rising. Paulie, read from some of this story.
Is Simon Harris Wolfe Tone in this analogy?
I think that must be right.
Okay. Yes. Well, now, 228 years later, Ireland is about to witness another year of the French as the government deepens military cooperation with Paris in the face of increasing global threats.
Increasing global threat.
This time, the French are not sending soldiers to Killala. Instead, as part of a series of government-to-government deals, they will send hundreds of millions of euro worth of advanced military equipment to the beleaguered Irish Defence Forces.
And what is it?
So it is armoured cars, tanks and guns.
I think you have to sing that, Niamh, don't you?
I'll spare the reader.
Come to take away our sons.
No, but the line is, many will no doubt question the wisdom of an island nation spending so much money on armoured vehicles.
Yeah, you think island nation, armoured vehicles. Will you read some more of that story?
However, this ignores the fact that it is the job of the Defence Forces to prepare for unlikely prospects. The new purchases will support the long-standing doctrine of the Defence Force to resist an invasion for as long as possible until support arrives from allies.
Who are our allies? God help us. Niamh, what is going on here?
Yeah, so I suppose, this was one story that was part of a number of articles which came out. It was the last week of February, and it was basically the details around an arms deal that has been done between Ireland and France. It will, all things taken together, it will be about 2 billion euros that Ireland is going to spend on military equipment in the coming years. But this particular one that involves these vehicles it's between 600 and 800 million for these vehicles. There's up to 400 vehicles that are going to be purchased. There's 3 different types. I would encourage the listeners to actually Google the names. We can put them in the show notes, because when you Google the names and you see the actual vehicles, they really are quite like tanks. They are tanks. One of them is in particular like a tank. There's guns mounted on them. And if you go and look through the arms company KNDS, their website, you will see just how these vehicles are prepared for, repelling a land invasion. That's what these vehicles are for. Now, again, we're an island nation. I'm not sure if we're expecting, ships to rock up and invade us by land and that we would roll out these vehicles to stop that, or whether we're planning on, as Paulie said, participating in the European Union's military mobility arrangements, and we will move these vehicles from Ireland to France or to wherever, and that we will participate in a land war in Europe or elsewhere. But these vehicles will either be used in Ireland for to repel a land invasion, which is terrifying, or be used by Irish soldiers overseas in a foreign war, which is also terrifying. Or this deal is part of arms trade opportunism, which wouldn't be so surprising when you consider that the arms company that's at the centre of this is part of the Irish Defence and Security Association, which is a Dublin-based industry. I can't remember the exact quote that they use.
Paulie, you're our arms trade opportunism correspondent
here,
aren't you? Yes. Tell us about about this company, about the IDSA.
IDSA.
I beg your pardon.
Yeah, well, they're they call themselves an industry group, founded a number of years back by a friend of the show, Ben Tonra, and a number of other people. And basically they function now as an intermediary between international arms manufacturers, Irish enterprises that are involved in the production of dual-use goods, and the state. And they're lobbying them on behalf of these various companies, basically trying to get the state to change its law so they can access various defence funds, and people can profit from. They say it on their website, a deteriorating global security. So they're optimist.
Right, and that phrase, of course, that the Irish Times used as well. The global situation. Yes.
And this is all. I should say we did some reporting. A while ago, we got some kind of internal documents where they were assessing the strengths and the weaknesses of the kind of venture that they were about to embark on when they were founding IDSA. And they were openly saying, look, this is extremely unpopular. It's something that the public doesn't support. There was a poll done last month that said, I think it was 77% of people support maintaining Irish neutrality. So the people that are doing this and pushing for this are aware of the public doesn't want it, but they're going ahead with it. With it anyway. So it's profoundly anti-democratic, and the public is not being consulted. There's a very, very loud and very, very annoying minority of people that are calling for this. And particularly one of the things about working for the Ditch is if you say anything that's even mildly critical of the European Union or NATO, you'll get in your replies anywhere between 10 to 20 Ukraine flag guys who look like Peter Griffin telling you that, no, actually, we need to do this, and we're not signaling to our European partners that we take defence seriously. So
it's worth recalling that Year of the French Part 1 went pretty bad, really. And, the Brits slaughtered thousands of people in Mayo and all over the country. I'm going to give one last quote from this Conor Gallagher piece with the typical Irish media insistence that everything in Europe is dead normal and just hunky-dory. Quote, purchasing equipment from France makes sense. It is a stable democracy, which is close to Ireland, both geographically and politically. So now no chance at all that there's going to be a fascist president in France next year. Or maybe that is what they mean by close politically.
Yeah.
Over to you.
So that's just one story of many, of just being a really crazy time this last 2 or so weeks. And I suppose since we said we would try and help people, including ourselves, make sense of it.
Good. So let's talk about this kind of weeks that we've been having in Irish defence and foreign policy. We haven't forgotten the war on. Presumably will still be on by the time this episode is released. And so let's talk about, Niamh will lead the way here, but let's talk about where we find ourselves with this kind of relationships that Paulie and Niamh have just been talking about, and with the developments that we've seen in the world over the last 10 days.
Yeah, so, I suppose the world is at It's not news to anyone. It's in particularly unstable time with the normalisation of war, the normalisation of genocide, the absolute erosion of international law. So all of that kind of at, global level. And then where does Ireland sit in that? And I suppose there's a massive disconnect between the government and how the government's behaving and then the will of the people. So as Paulie said, we've, I think the most recent opinion poll was that 75% of the Irish people support Irish neutrality. That's across kind of political persuasions. It's just a solid figure that Irish people support neutrality. And that Ireland should be a voice for peace. And then we have the government actively taking steps, for decades, but in the last year or so it's been on steroids, particularly under Micheál Martin's leadership, of this total erosion of Irish neutrality. So I pulled out a few things over, the kind of the last week of February. This is actually before the illegal war on Iran. For me, one of the most worrying things is the maritime security strategy.
I think that a lot of people missed that.
Yes.
When that came out. So explain to us what a maritime security strategy looks like. We've been hearing a lot about cables.
Yeah, so the government,
to do with that.
So they launched the first time, this is the first maritime security strategy ever launched for the country. It's particularly grim reading for anyone who supports neutrality, which is over 2/3 of the population. I would even say that the government starts out by kind of setting out what their understanding or their definition of neutrality is, which they call military neutrality, a term that doesn't exist in international law. There's no such thing as military neutrality. And the government have kind of concocted this concept that Ireland is militarily neutral, and that the way they define that is that everything up until the point where Ireland joins NATO is within this kind of military neutrality strategy. So every single thing, including the use of Shannon Airport, the Israeli overflights, the arms deal with France, all of that is fine. We're still completely neutral. I mean, this is an absolute delusion. And so we have the government set out in the maritime strategy where they say, and this is a direct quote, that the strategy claims to be, quote, in line with Ireland's policy of military neutrality, which is characterised by non-membership of military alliances or mutual defence arrangements. But then the strategy goes on to say that Ireland will embrace military alliances and form mutual defence arrangements. And those military alliances include the Joint Expeditionary Force, which is a British creation. It contains 10 of the Northern NATO states. So Ireland will be embracing this, and we will be trying to seek observer status within the they call it the JEF Plus, so the Joint Expeditionary Force Plus. We'll be participating in exercises. I mean, this sounds like a fantastic opportunity. That's the way it's being kind of sold. That's just one of the military alliances that we'll be embracing. Then we will be embracing NATO. A lot of people don't realise that Ireland is actually a partner of NATO since 1999. But we will
But
be...
that's a partnership for peace, isn't it?
Of course, a war alliance that's building peace. This is where we're at. So yeah, we're going to be building more peace with NATO, the war alliance, which as we actually had the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte say the quiet part out loud last week, where he said, that NATO is, according to them, a defence alliance. But then he also went on to say that it is a platform, this is a direct quote, a platform for the US to project its power in the world. So now we've been told, that's a direct quote by Mark Rutte. So we will participate in NATO exercises and training, and then we'll also deepen our engagement with EU defence structures. And then we'll also, and this is particularly concerning, we will form bilateral alliances with Britain and France, both nuclear powers, so that they can patrol Irish waters. So that is a total erosion of Irish neutrality, Irish sovereignty. There's other stuff about building naval bases on the East Coast and the West Coast, and that they would operate as forward operating bases for other militaries, in the same way that Shannon Airport operates as a forwarding base at the moment for the US, that we would have that for naval. There's also this idea that we will promote Ireland to become a European hub for regional monitoring of the Atlantic. So there's this kind of aspiration to platform Ireland as this country out on the edge of the Atlantic, and that we should allow, the British, the French, NATO, whoever wants to come over, basically, that fits into those kind of like-minded partners, that they can come over and establish themselves here and look out on the cables, right?
Yeah, presumably it's Russian subs that are after our cables, right? Isn't that the presumption? Can I just ask then, so we've got on the one hand this maritime strategy and the weapons purchases, and we've also got the government unable to find the words to express the illegality of the American and Israeli war in Iran. And we've got the discussion of the triple lock. Maybe you just want to briefly explain what the triple lock is and why the government is trying to get rid of it and where this leaves this discussion.
Yeah, so this is particularly pertinent at the moment because, as we know, as the listeners know, the US-Israeli strikes on Iran completely illegal. There is no shadow of a doubt that there is any legality. It is an entirely illegal war that was declared as such by the UN Secretary General in an emergency session of the Security Council on the evening of the outbreak of those strikes. So there was no doubt in anyone's mind that this was a completely illegal operation according to the United Nations and anyone who has any knowledge at all of international law.
And actually, most European leaders and Mark Carney in Canada have said that too, even while saying it's illegal, but what the hell, we're going along with it anyway. But the Irish haven't even been able to say that much.
No, so then we had Helen McEntee, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, come on the radio on the Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. And when she was asked about the illegality, she said, direct quote, that she can't say. So she can't say if it's illegal. Now, is that because she doesn't know? She hasn't been briefed on international law? Or because there's so much pressure bearing down on her? And, is everyone singing from the same hymn sheet that none of them can call out an illegal war when they see one? And this wasn't just that Sunday in that interview. It continued for, in Tuesday on Leaders' Questions in the Dáil, failure to call it illegal. Again, on The Tonight Show, a TD from Galway, Albert Doyle, who again couldn't say, he said, we will find out down the line if this is illegal. We don't have the information right now, but down the line. And then he goes on to say, there's no UN mandate that I know of, that we know of, as though, it was kind of some secret that, we haven't been told about a UN mandate, but who knows if there might be one out there somewhere. This kind of...
And so the context then, UN mandate is kind of a key phrase in Irish foreign policy at the moment because the triple lock means that Ireland can only participate in a military action if it has a UN mandate, that we go as peacekeepers when there's a UN force sent to a particular place. The government wants to get rid of the triple lock so that it can make its own decisions, and we're supposed to trust it to make its own decisions about when and where Ireland engages its troops. But if we can't describe this war in Iran as illegal, what possibility is there that the Americans, the British, the French wouldn't be able to persuade Ireland into an action in the absence of the triple lock?
Yeah, exactly. So the triple lock, there's been so much confusion about the triple lock, but the triple lock is very simply a piece of legislation that governs the deployment of Irish troops overseas. And it sets out that for more than 12 troops to be sent overseas, there must be approval from the Cabinet, from Dáil Éireann, and the mission they're being sent on must have a United Nations mandate. The United Nations mandate is in Irish law since 1960. And then there were affirmations or commitments made to it in the context of the Nice Treaty and again in the context of the Lisbon Treaty. And it was on that basis that we voted in those two European Union referendums. Now the government wants to revoke the triple lock. It wants to do so that Irish troops can be sent overseas on potentially European Union military missions. We've already participated in European Union training missions. And also NATO missions. Once the triple lock is gone, if they manage to remove it, Irish troops there will be literally no impediment. And we saw towards the end of last week, there was an opinion piece in the Examiner where we had, quote, experts urging the government, so experts urging the government to deploy to Cyprus. That, you know, we've seen there's a whole, you know, there's a narrative that there's a split, a transatlantic split between the Europeans and the US. And actually, if you ever needed proof that that is not the case, it's how we've seen things unfold over the last week, where we have at present we have 8 European states that are sending their militaries to Cyprus, to the Eastern Mediterranean. And there's an opinion piece in the Irish Examiner calling on Ireland to do the same. And the only thing that is stopping Ireland from doing so is the triple lock and the fact that we cannot deploy on military operations unless there's a United Nations mandate. So it has never been more important to keep the triple lock. You know, we're at a moment of unprecedented global instability over the last 80 years. And the government is at this particular moment planning to remove one of the only safeguards that keeps us out of war. So, yeah, that's, I suppose, the triple lock and what's at stake if it goes. And it's very pertinent at the moment because of, you know, all of the Europeans that are rushing to the aid of the US. And I suppose the embarrassment of Ireland as Micheál Martin goes to Washington with the bowl of shamrock, that we can't participate in, you know, in that European mission or whatever.
Yeah, it's the phony war over Greenland seems a long time ago now, doesn't it? So, guys, Shannon Airport has been another aspect of the kind of military neutrality question. With the Americans, we know, continuing to use Shannon Airport as essentially a forward operating base for the Eurasian landmass. And you guys in the ditch have been particularly strong, I think, in trying to both document the use of Shannon and to make sure that issue stays in the public domain.
Yeah, I think just if you go back, like as a kind of general point, if you go back to what the Irish Times talks about global threats, that when publications like the Irish Times talk about global threats, they're not talking about Shannon Airport being used as a de facto military base by a nation that drops bombs on schools. That's not what they're talking about. There are only they're very specific threats as they perceive them. Those are the global threats, but not our airspace being used to transport munitions to Israel either. Those are not part of those global threats. A Russian tanker, maybe 1,000 kilometers off Ireland, that's a threat. But the United States transporting troops over to Kuwait the day before they drop bombs on a school in Iran, that's not a global threat that affects Ireland. And I think, like, in the context of all these discussions and kind of how these things are framed in the media, none of those things are even come into play as any sort of a threat. The only focus is on Russia and countries like that. So the idea that Ireland is neutral, if Ireland was neutral, there's a very simple test that you could apply. Maybe it's a bit reductive, but can Russian or Iranian military aircraft land at Shannon Airport and pass through Shannon Airport? No, they can't. But United States military aircraft can land and pass through Shannon Airport because we're not neutral. We take sides and things. And at the moment, the side that we're on is the side that is killing schoolgirls in Iran as part of an illegal war.
If you go to ontheditch.com, and you should, see the stories, to donate, to subscribe, etc., you'll also see that the Ditch has given over part of its website to a documenting of the Shannon Airport ongoing use by the American troops.
Yeah, look, more than anything, we're just so respectful and appreciative of the work of the Irish anti-war movement. I know I covered a court appearance of 3 of their activists, and she said as part of their responses to us that they very much see themselves as building on the tradition of the Irish anti-war movement, the people who who have disrupted operations at Shannon for decades now, and also activists north of the border as well. And the movement now, it's got a number of constituent groups, adjacent groups, people like Palestine Action Era, people like Shannon Watch, and between them all, they've put together this site called ShannonWarport.ie, and we link to it on the ditch, and there you can see in very stark terms, particularly since the US attack on Iran, the number of US military flights that are passing through Shannon, and some of them going on towards the Middle East. And
I mean, Irish neutrality, it has to be said, is a grassroots point of view, and it's a grassroots source of activism in Ireland. There are people all over the country, and I know, Niamh, you've been traveling around Ireland for more than a year now, it seems like, doing these neutrality road shows. What have you seen in terms of kind of local groups and people all over the country and their interest and their desire to do something in relation to neutrality?
Yeah, so I suppose back again to the kind of the disconnect between the people and the government, because we organised what we call the Neutrality Roadshow. So it was myself and Fionn Wallace who kind of started the thing off. And then we had others that joined us along the way, Paddy Bresnahan, Rory Rowan, Pater King. There's a number of people. Owen actually joined us at one or
Dundalk,
two in Dundalk. So we went around the country for the most intense month was the month of May, where we did, I think, 22 events in 30 days, driving around in a transit van. The van has now given up. It's finished. But yeah, we did, in total, we've done, I think, 46 events in 24 counties. And, you know, every single place we went, you know, we never met anyone who was anti-neutrality. Everyone is in favour of neutrality. Most people were horrified at how much our neutrality is being eroded. Everyone is coming at the idea of neutrality, you know, more or less from the standpoint that this is a historic position that Ireland has taken for centuries. If you go back as far as the decade of Wolfe Tone, almost the year of the French. That there's a massive popular support for neutrality, and the government is not recognising that or reflecting that in the policies that it's enacting in Leinster House. And, you know, we had people from all age groups coming, but I think one of the most concerning groups that came to the roadshows were parents or family members of peacekeepers, because the peacekeepers themselves can't speak out, but the family members can, and they're really concerned at the direction of travel that Ireland is going in and whether their loved ones will be sent off to fight in a future war. But yeah, neutrality is definitely a very current issue. It's very much alive and well. We saw that with Catherine Connolly's presidential election campaign, where she was clearly a candidate that ran on a platform of neutrality. But we see, and maybe our next, and maybe in the coming weeks, we can look at the mainstream media and what they've been putting out on neutrality, because there's a total kind of, gaslighting of the public position in terms of neutrality, and this idea that we just need to grow up. And if we could just mature a little bit, then we would realise that neutrality is kind of this outdated, archaic concept. And, you know, the line is usually, well, neutrality worked very well in 1939, but now we're a different country. We can afford all these fancy military, tanks and whatever. So why wouldn't we buy them and jump on board with our European friends and allies?
What about, hear me out on this, right? Should we grow up, get rid of the triple lock, and send the defence forces into Taiwan? Because I think the People's Liberation Army have been dragging their heels. I keep hearing that China is going to invade Taiwan, and they never do it. I want to see China reunited, and I think our defence forces should be the ones to really kickstart that whole process there.
Yeah.
But we can't with the triple lock, so I think we should get rid of that.
Get rid of the triple lock.
We should send our troops to Cuba, to Venezuela.
Send the James Joyce, James Joyce, one to Cuba.
This is a real grown-up conversation.
Owen is like thinking outside the box.
Great.
We're going to have
all these guys, John O'Brien, Bridget Laffin, Ben Tonra, they're too blinkered. We need to send the defence forces into Iran, actually.
Yeah, do what the Cubans did, send them to Africa.
Exactly. If we're going to not be neutral, we might as well not be neutral in interesting ways all across the world instead of the obvious. Well, look, the ditch and the party line are not neutral on neutrality. That is for sure. And as Niamh suggested, we will be returning to this issue. The government is not going to let it go, and we're not either. So you will be seeing much more about Irish military ambitions and about neutrality, both in the ditch and right here on the party line. But I think for now, we're going to finish it up there, if that's all right, lads. Yes, we'll call it a podcast. Thank you, Eoghan, Roman, Paulie.
Yep. Thanks a million, everyone. Mila buikas.
And you can shout down the party line by emailing theditchpartyline@gmail.com. Keep up with The Ditch by WhatsApp. You can go and you can join the WhatsApp if you go to ontheditch.com. And you can also, of course, support The Ditch with a donation or a subscription. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.